Welcome to My Accent is No Accident podcast. I am your host, Maritza. We are here today with an incredible human being, a soul whisperer. Yes, you heard it right. A soul whisperer who will delight us with his stories and help us connect with our highest potential to become everything we can be. His name is Stuart Elliot. Stuart, let me start by reading our audience your bio.
Okay, no problem. It's great to be here.
Stuart Elliot, known as the Soul Whisperer, liberates individuals from negative self-talk and self-sabotage, unlocking their true potential. With expertise in classic and new code NLP, Ericksonian conversational hypnotherapy, and a passion for mindfulness and positive psychology, Stuart guides people to break free from mental prisons and connect with their soul's purpose. Born in the UK, he spent 18 years in Africa before settling in South China, where he met his wife and became the father of his two beautiful daughters. Stuart's intuitive gifts of truth and clarity complement his formal training, enable him to facilitate transformative journeys of self-love and empowerment. Drawing upon this rare blend of formal studies as well as his unique perspective and understanding of people gleaned from living for extended periods of diverse continents, he has developed the Potential CNH trademark coaching system that he will create himself. This system is especially designed to help you find the solution that will quickly allow you to connect to your greatness and flourish. In addition to his love of helping people create joy-filled lives, Stuart has a deep love of nature, especially African nature, and wildlife. His dreams is that we can find peace within ourselves so we in harmony with this beautiful planet we are all an integral part of. Stuart, it is an honor to have you as a guest on my podcast.
Well, I think the honor is mine to be the guest, and it's always great to have a conversation with you. And I'm just grateful that you value me enough to be able to invite me here and let me share a little bit of what has been going on in my life.
Yes, it is a pleasure, Stuart. And I do ask a question. My initial question to all my guests is, Stuart, tell me, what is your accent and why is not an accident?
Well, that is a very interesting question, and accents play a big part in our life. I mean, I was born in the UK and I lived in the north of England, and there's a lot of different accents. And my accent then, when I was living there, was very different from what it is now. Because when I moved to South Africa, people couldn't understand me, so I had to change and modify it so that I could speak it. And even my uncle, he lived in London, I lived in Manchester. There's a big divide in accents there, and he called me a foreigner. He says, "You're not from England, you're a total foreigner." So that was an interesting thing there. But yeah, I mean, the accent is part of who we are as a person when we grew up. It doesn't have to define us as we move on in life, because we can, as I've done, change our accent. And then I've taken on, different parts of Africa, the accent of the people there in a way. I've become more neutral so we can have that communication, which is so important, so missing in this world today. So I think the accent is as much part of our foundation, but it's not our limit.
Exactly. It is not our limit. And I know that you have many accents because you have been living in many different places. So tell me about those 18 years in Africa.
Well, it started back in '86 when I decided I was going to do an overland trip through Africa back to the UK. So I flew out to South Africa, spent a month there, and then spent 6 months driving through different countries back to the UK. And I got off the ferry and I looked around and I said, no, I don't want to be in the UK anymore. I'm going back to Africa. So 3 months later, I, flew back to South Africa and then I settled there for 18 years. And in that time, obviously I had many, many experiences, but I've got this passion for Africa and the wildlife felt areas. So I spent as much time as I could in parts of South Africa where there's a lot of wildlife, but also Botswana, Zimbabwe when it was safe to go there, and as many places as I could to experience that, should we say, in a way, primitive living, because I was always camping. And going through Botswana, it was a question of you take your 4x4, you put on enough water, you put on enough fuel, you put on all the spares you need, and you just go. Because at that time, there's no GPS, there's no cell phones, it's just paper maps and a compass. And you
Yes,
drive through the desert and you do this. And it is beautiful if you believe it's beautiful. Now, for
yes,
some people, it's scary.
it's natural. It is like
Yeah.
very natural.
Mhm.
And then what countries, like you drove all the way through Africa or South
Yeah.
Africa?
No, we drove from South Africa back to the UK. So we started off in South Africa, went to Botswana, Zimbabwe. At that time, it wasn't safe back in '86, so we
Yeah.
didn't go there. We did pay a quick visit into Vic Falls, which was okay. But then we went to Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, and then Burundi, Central Africa, Zaire, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, Niger, Algeria, and Morocco, and then through Spain and France to back to the UK.
So you,
So there was a lot of different adventures in different countries.
wow, beautiful. So you were able to live and see live different cultures all the way
Yeah,
from,
yeah.
and Africa is where we all come from. So
Well, that's what people say. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I can't say, but yeah. But I think it's in everybody in some way or another, the energy of Africa, because it has that special energy.
yes, and then you are very like you're very lucky to be able to do that and then being able to see all the differences. What are some of the differences that you see? Are those somehow telling you that we all are the same, or are those something that you say we're totally different and we shouldn't be living together? And then the question is more, kind of like telling our audience that what is the differences in cultures that right there.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to be very careful is judging, because we come from this culture, so we tend to, it's a natural thing for many people, not saying everybody, but we tend to judge from our own experiences. And I'll give you a good example of that. And I think it was in Malawi, but we were driving down this dirt road, and I saw a gentleman walking down the road, and this, it was the rainy season, so it was quite wet and everything else, and he had one shoe in his hand, one shoe on his head with two bananas in it, and no shoes on his feet. And he's walking down the road. And I first judged, I said, why is he, he's crazy. I would have put my shoes on. And that's me thinking from, my background. But then I got to thinking, I thought to myself, well, shoes are almost impossible, especially good dress shoes to find. And I don't know how much they cost and everything else. And he's wise because number one, he's not wearing them and destroying them in the dirt. He's been born probably and grown up without wearing shoes, so his feet are hardened. He wouldn't have the problems that I possibly would have if I was walking down there. And then the other thing is, African people generally carry things on their heads. So he's got the shoe on his head with the banana in. It's so easy and natural for him. He's got his hands free.
Yeah.
But I was looking at him, judging him, because I was looking from my perspective. But when I saw that, I could see the wisdom and start to understand how different peoples adapt to their environment and their upbringing. And it doesn't make them any less than us. Actually, in many ways, it makes them wiser. For instance, my father, he came out to South Africa once to visit, and the person who's helping him with his suitcases just picks it up and puts it on her head. And then she walks off, both hands free, totally balanced, totally natural. He'd been struggling and doing his backing and everything else. So, who's the wiser one, her or him? I would suggest it's her, because she knows how to do it, and she's got the balance, she's got the freedom to do everything else, where he's like, trying to pull this suitcase.
Exactly. It is incredible. I forgot about that. In Africa, that they carry things on their head, and then
Yeah,
you kind of like here in the Occident, you're like, um, my head. I don't think I
yeah.
have the strength, but I don't think that we have ever used our head to carry something. Although in Colombia there is the North Coast, they carry the fruit
Hmm.
on their heads.
Yeah. But if you think of it, it makes so much sense, because both your hands are free, and you're not designed as a human being to carry heavy things in your arms, because rain on the back and everything else. Whereas if it's on your head, it goes through your neck, through your skeletal system, down to the ground. So you've got that inner strength.
This
And once you've got that balance, everything it works. So I mean,
you're imbalanced.
people have beautiful, beautiful understandings that we don't even consider.
Yes. And then I have an understanding, like as you moved on, and even in the same country to different in the same continent to different countries, you will find differences in cultures that are
Of course, yeah,
big
of course.
from one to another.
Yeah, and one of the overriding things I found, the joy that people had in the daily life. That was one of the most beautiful discoveries, that they were so happy. People who had maybe nothing, they were much happier than many of the people back in the UK who had, in theory, everything. They
Yeah,
just had this beautiful ability to connect to, everything about them, and that was so special.
it is a simple life that allows them to see the happiness in little things.
Yeah, because they're living in the moment more. They're not concerned with the past so much, or the future. They're living in that moment. Obviously, the climate's nice. It's usually sunny, so that also plays a big part. I think if you travel around the world and you go to the places where it's dark and dismal, people become moody. Definitely in Manchester in September, October, all the doctors' rooms used to fill up with people with depression, because it gets grey, the skies become lower, and people are sort of all walking around with their head down, because they're not going to see sun for the next however many months.
Oh,
So the sun plays a big part in it as well.
and I think that somehow the more you have, the more you want. And
Yeah.
I experienced that in Colombia as well. That when you see different culture and people that live a more simpler life, that joy and happiness
Hmm.
of simply walking around the mountain or playing at the river it is incredible and contagious.
It is. And another experience which really blew my mind was, we were I think it was in the Tule Block area of Botswana, which is the junction between Botswana, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. But it was a big five type country, and there's no fences. So, the animals are free to come and go as they please. We were out on a walk, and we saw two children, about 8 years old, walking through the veldt. And we stopped, we had a conversation. They hadn't got a care in the world. They were as happy as anything else. And we said, "Where are you going?" "No, we're going to school." So we look around, there's nothing. You can see nothing apart from just the natural environment. I said, "Where's school?" "No, it's about an hour that way." "Well, where do you live?" "No, about 2 hours that way." But they were full of joy and happiness, walking a couple of hours through, what we would consider dangerous country, to go to school, and then have some, fun with their fellow classmates, and then come back and go home. And this is what they were experiencing, this beauty every single day, and this, should we say, freedom, which many people don't even consider.
be there. Oh my goodness, that is beautiful.
Mm,
And just to be able to just understand how these kids probably also are more independent.
yeah,
That,
and they're connected to their environment, so they understand it
yes,
in a way which we cannot.
exactly. And you see, you mentioned something very important. You say to what it looks a dangerous part of the country, and yet
Yeah.
when you come to a city, know that you cannot leave your kids alone at the park because that is very
Hmm.
dangerous. It's
Well,
like,
that's it. There's different dangers, and we're used to maybe the city dangers in a way, but we're not used to the open, countryside and the wild animals that are there. So we consider that as dangerous, but we don't think about the dangers in the city.
in the city, yes.
It's a different concept, and it's. I mean, if you took people who've never been into a city away, from the countryside and put them in the city, they would have a lot of challenges because the dangers are all new. So it's that perspective we have and what we're familiar with.
Yeah. And then that brings us to a very important thing in diversity and inclusion is when you see the human being, when a human being
Hmm.
sees somebody that is different or sees something that is different that is they are not used to, the very first thing that comes to mind and is fear. And
Yeah, because you're judging.
yes, so, but exactly that fear is discrimination and not welcoming, not
Hmm.
including the person. And what we need to do is more of be more of explorer. And if
Hmm.
we see something that is different, obviously, if you see somebody with a gun, don't approach them.
Yeah, but again, it could be a game ranger, so he's okay. So you've got to have a little bit more
Yeah.
understanding of the situation. But I think one of the big problems is it goes back to colonial days, if you like, where the British Empire and the other empires, they created this division. They looked down on all the other people because they thought they were superior, and their traditions and their perceptions, if you like, into those countries, and then they didn't have see any value in the other peoples who lived there. They didn't want to understand their traditions and how they've evolved, and so they created this division which didn't necessarily exist before, and I think that's a big problem.
Wow, you say something beautiful and very, like it's true that they created a difference that didn't exist before. Because the truth
Hmm.
is that the human being does not know about differences. When we are
No, because
born,
we are the same. We
we
have
are
to eat, we have to sleep, and we have to do exercise and things like that. We just find different ways of doing it. And if you think of pre-travel, if you like, people adapted to their environment and ate the food that they could find in that environment. You didn't get oranges in the middle of the desert, for instance, but you found other fruits or other foods, and you worked with the seasons and what the land provided you. And then people started to see and cultivate crops, and that was a different phase. But now, I mean, you can go in the UK where there's very few fruits available. You can get virtually any fruit from the world because it's all shipped in.
yes, you
Uh,
can.
it's,
We
it's
like
crazy.
evolution has helped us to connect somehow more, but we have created also that separation
Yeah,
of me, you, them, right? Um,
yeah.
so one of the things that I noticed is that all of these things that we're talking about and all the wisdom that you have gained has allowed you to understand more that we are connected to nature and
Hmm.
that our soul is connected to a planet, to the world, to the nature. Um,
Hmm.
would you like to talk more in depth about that?
Yeah, it's very difficult to talk about it in some ways. without people having the experiences. For instance, one beautiful experience I had was when I was in Zimbabwe, and this was, after I travelled through Africa and come back there. But I was in the area of Zimbabwe near the Victoria Falls Isle, and my friend and I were staying in the game reserve, but we'd rented a little brick chalet that they had in that area. We decided we were going to have a barbecue, or as we called it over there, a braai. And I said, okay, you get the meat ready. I'll go and make the fire. So I went over to this little brick place to make the fire. And I built the wood and everything, got everything ready. And I was just getting ready to light it. And I just looked up into the trees and bushes and the thick bush that was there about 5 or 10 feet away. And I noticed that there was an elephant, a wild elephant, stood there watching me. And my first thought was, if I light the fire, it's not going to be very polite because the smoke's going to upset the elephant. And I just stood there and just looked at him, and we just had a conversation. We had about 5-10 minutes having this beautiful conversation, and I was accepted by him. I didn't feel fear. He didn't feel threatened. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And then I noticed that there was an antelope, a deer-sized antelope stood next to him in the thick bush. And then a little bit later, a family of warthogs came past on their way to get their evening sundowner. And one of them actually brushed my legs as it walked past.
My goodness.
And they didn't even recognize that I was out of place. I was just accepted in that environment. It was such a special, special moment. And that is, if we decide ourselves, we can connect not only to nature, but to each other. But it's the prejudices and all these things that we instill and the protection barriers that we put in, which stop us from, connecting to people, to the environment, to the world, because we're not separate. We're all together. We're all part of.
Yeah, we're all.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons I have this picture behind me. This is part of the scenery in this environment, where I live, and it's my private gratitude meditation for the beauty of this planet, because there is so much beauty. In the middle of the desert, you can find beauty if you choose to look for it and recognize it and get outside of this judgment that we carry around with us. It doesn't matter where we are; there is so much beauty, and it's the same with people. Everybody has beauty in them if we allow ourselves to see it and don't judge.
Exactly. We are all part of the greatest creation, and we are all connected. And nature helps us to do that. The animals, like even in your backyard. You don't if you don't have the means to go to a different country, to a different like I would love to. That's in my bucket list, to go to Africa. But if you go to your backyard and you look up, like we like to do something with my daughter, and sometimes I do it by myself with my cats, which is funny. I just go out there, put a chair. I don't go on the floor because I live in Florida and I'm not very fond of frogs. I don't want them on me. So I sit on a chair and I look up, and I am amazed of all the stars that you can see. And if I just disconnect to everything, to every sound, then you start listening to nature. And you start seeing and manifesting that peace and that beauty, and you start feeling the connection with the world, with the universe. And you don't need to be able to meditate. You just need to live the moment. Like if you go to a beautiful scene like you have behind you, and you just want to leave that moment, and it takes just 2-3 minutes or probably seconds, and it brings you such peace that is incredible.
And you know what you say in your backyard, you can just sit there and just look at the insects, the ants moving around in the grass or whatever, and going about their daily business, and you just feel this connection and this deeper understanding of really what this planet is and how it affects you if you allow it to.
Yes. And also the another part that is important, we're human beings, so we are going to tend to do the things that we do the way we do them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are living in this judging all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not for you to feel guilty if you judge somebody else, but to come to the understanding and realization that if you do, and if you do, and it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that everybody does.
No.
You can have your boundaries. You can have, like, I don't do this, and it's fine. You don't have to do it. Or I don't know, an example, different religions. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to convert into another religion to understand, or to need to be like another person in another religion. You just have to understand and to realize and discover and be okay with it, and then walk along.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of love. You walk along like the animals.
Yeah.
The animals drink from the same puddle of water, and they are all together, but yet they are different.
Mm-hmm. And they
They
accept each other.
they accept each other, and there is this point of respect,
Mm-hmm.
and they move along. Like
Mm-hmm.
with the antelope that you were saying, and the animals that you encounter, they accept your presence, but they didn't have to become human or hunt you down, and you don't
No.
have to hunt them down. You just accept their presence and respect each other.
Yeah, and recognize that we are all part of the same thing. And
Which is
that
beautiful and amazing.
yeah, it is so beautiful. But again, we have the ego, which causes a lot of problems. And we have people who think they're superior to this because they've got this thing, and or that thing. If you compare humans to animals, we're the weakest of the animals, but yet we think we're superior because our brain may be developed in different ways than the animals, but they have this innate connection to the planet, to the earth. They know things that we never even would guess.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that we have to do all this comparison and then look down on things rather than be curious and see the value, see the lessons, see the beauty that we can pick up from it. I mean, there's a beautiful story I read a few years ago in a book by a gentleman called Lawrence van der Post. And he spent about 18 months or so living with the Bushmen in southern Africa in the Kalahari Desert. And he wrote this book in about 69. And there's one particular story that always comes to mind. That he was on in a 4x4 on a hunt with his bushmen, and they were hunting a big antelope, which is about the size of a cow, and they're chasing it for 10, 20, 30 miles through the desert before they manage to slaughter it. Then they have the gratitude and everything else that is part of their whole cycle because they don't slaughter wantonly. But then they have a challenge. How do they get this animal back to where they're found? Well, they don't. They just have a couple of people who stay with the animal to make sure the predators don't take it, and then send the other people back to get the families. And because this is their way of life, they have, what we would call, flimsy shelters, and that's one reason people look down on them, because they don't have permanent structures. But what use is it if they've got to travel all this way through the desert? But here's the thing that I only recently thought of. How do they know where their family is? They've been chasing this animal for 20 or 30 miles through the desert at full speed. How do they know where to go back to get their family? how do they know then where to take the families to where the animal is waiting for them to eat it? They just know because they're part of. Yeah. And yet we are supposedly superior, and we try to distance ourselves from all this planet and this beautiful world we live in. It's strange, isn't it, that we do that?
It is very strange. We disconnect, and that's what when we disconnect is where we are experiencing 100% plus ego.
Yeah, and we lose because of that, don't we?
Yes.
So we're not the superior races we think we are. We're not connected.
We are not. We are not able to connect. That's true. And so, on your coaching, you apply all these so that people can reconnect to their soul.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to have that conversation and get past all the nonsense. Get out of the ego states and everything else, and just have that conversation and connect with the person at their level. And also, part of that is to understand what they are experiencing. As we mentioned earlier, words are labels, and we have attachments to them. So I could say a word, use it in a sentence, and somebody may have a totally different understanding of what I'm talking about. And if I'm in judgment and everything else, I might think that it's their problem that they don't understand me and they need to change. But it's actually the other way around. I need to listen to them and get into their world and see how they're experiencing it. And that's how I can connect at a deeper level through and to hear the soul message. And from that conversation, then we can find out what the nonsense is that is holding them back. And then find ways to let them experience, or even just reflect back to them. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm hearing. So they are connecting to their soul message. But we trap ourselves in our mind, and we sometimes need help to break out of that trap, the mental trap that we create for ourselves, so we can actually listen to what our body's telling us.
And that is beautiful. The mental trap that we create to ourselves. Because we create it and it's not real. Yeah. We think it's there, but we created it. And sometimes there are situations in your life that take you to different states of mind. Somebody with PTSD, for instance, somebody with trauma. After the trauma, then everything becomes a creation of their mind. And that's what creates the PTSD. That's what creates the depression. So what you're saying is, like, once you're able to kind of like separate from that, you will be able to connect back to your main purpose, to your main soul, to your soul.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it, if we create it, we can uncreate it. It's a very simplistic way of putting it, but that's basic. And obviously, we need to, quite a lot of times we need help. We need to have these conversations, and we need to, put the issues away that have created that mental prison, because it is quite complicated sometimes. But at the end of the day, that's basically what it is. And once we've got that away, then we're open to hear. But the other thing we have is the problem with trusting what we hear from ourselves, trusting our instincts, trusting our intuition and things like that. Because we have this conditioning applied to us that we have to fit into, and we lose, that ability. I mean, if you take a young child, we've both got children, and around 10 or 11, 12 months old, they just decide, I can walk. They never question it. They never doubt it. They just do it. And yeah, they go through struggles because they've got to get the balance. They've got to get out all the coordination. But they never have a doubt that they can do it.
Yes.
Because they've got that, should we say, a trance of possibility that they live in. And after they walk, then they learn to run. Then they learn to climb. They learn to do other things. They never have anything that stops them from believing they can do this. But we get older, we get conditioned, and we get told these things, and we start doubting. We go into that world.
Yes. And I have always said that are the best mirror of um, God in the spiritual world because they're
Hmm.
so pure
Yeah.
that even when they are among others, they're so pure and they teach us so much.
Well, they are our teachers if we are open to it, if we don't have ego. I mean, I had a beautiful lesson from an 18-year-old child when I was teaching English. I didn't have any problem with the ego there. At the time, I thought, because I was trying to teach a point and he didn't understand it, and I was just getting more frustrated and trying to push it harder and harder at him, but I wasn't listening to him because my ego was triggered. And I
Okay.
thought he's stupid in my mind. So eventually I just gave up and said, he's stupid, he's never going to get it. And then after the class, I sat down and I had a habit of just reviewing what worked and what didn't work. And I just said to myself, you know something, he's not stupid. You're acting stupid because you're not listening to him. He's told you he can't understand the way you're delivering it. And
Yeah.
all you're doing is trying to push it harder and harder in the same way. He's already told you, but you're not listening.
Yes.
So in the next class, I came along and I had the same topic and I taught a totally different way. All of a sudden, he was so happy. He just got it. He understood it. Because I stepped outside of that nonsense that I was carrying around with, and I was actually listening to him and the lesson he had for me. And that's what we have to work on as adults when we've got children or we're interacting with children. We've got to listen and see the lessons and see how they're experiencing things and see how, as you say, pure, how beautiful they are and how they don't have limitations until we
Yes.
put them there.
Yes. That reminded me of something that my daughter did when she was little. Um, she we had were living in a house with 2 floors, and the den where we had her playground was towards the like it had an opening towards the first floor, and
Hmm.
we had just moved in, and we had some tools sitting on the little futon that we had for her to play and everything, and she just moved it away, and this thing flew downstairs. And the very first thing, as a parent, your judgment, why are you doing? Why did you do that?
Hmm.
And her question is like, because I can.
Yeah.
I will, as I was like, I couldn't, like, my mouth was trying not to laugh,
Yeah.
but my mother and I looked at each other, and I'm like, okay, you have to come here and pick it up with me. But then I realized that she didn't do it on purpose. She just moved it
Yeah.
away from her. She
Yeah.
she didn't realize that by moving it, it was just gonna fly down.
Well, that wasn't part of the thing, was it? That
But
wasn't
it
even in
worked.
her mind. Yeah. I just wanted, it's too cluttered. I need this space. And
And it,
we have to listen and we have to hear what their experience, the intent behind them, and the purity of it, the beauty of it. And then we can grow as people instead of getting triggered and being cross with them.
and then sometimes explaining also that just because you can do something, then you need to limit yourself, right? Sometimes
Hmm.
we can do things, but do we have to do them only because we can?
Hmm.
So
Well, how how far Discovery Road is she? That's what we've got to look at.
yeah, but it applies to life, to everybody.
Yeah, yeah, that's part of the growth process, and we've got to see where they are, step outside that judgment, and then help them to see, okay, yeah, because you can, you don't have to all the time,
Oh,
or
that's
you can do it in a bit more gently, or however, or whatever. But straight away, it's just like, oh, look at me, I can do this.
yes, I can do it. Exactly. So So we're coming to the end of our interview, and I would like to
So quick. So
we're probably gonna have to have a second interview because I wanted to ask you more about your coaching and the system that you created. But I would like right now to see if you can give the audience some information about how they can find you and contact you.
well, the easiest way, I mean, and I think it's easy to put it in the chat, is LinkedIn, is the social media network that I use. Because of my physical location, I don't have Facebook or Instagram or anything like that because they're blocked over here. So either, LinkedIn or through my email, and the easiest email is Stuart, Stuart, at spg.bz. And in American English, that's BZ.
Yes. And then
So,
and then so in LinkedIn, Stuart Elliot. Look for Stuart
one.
Elliot. One.
Stuart Elliott 1, because someone else has got my name. Yeah, so it's the number 1 after it.
Okay.
And my profile is based in Hong Kong, so that might help people. But Stuart Elliott 1, and Elliot is with 2 L's and 2 T's.
Awesome.
Because there's 4 different ways of spelling it, so it can get confusing.
Oh, I'm just looking at my paper. I think I missed the split.
Yeah, if you go back in our history, it's 4 different clans of the Elliots from Scottish times.
Oh,
so
okay.
Each one had a different spelling.
Awesome. And then, do you have anything else that you would like to tell the audience? Last message that you would like to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people have forgotten all the potential in themselves. And because of that, they don't live to their true, shall we say, birth potential. They've moved in or been conditioned into a limitation. And I think if we can remember back to the time we decided to walk and just look at children and see how they can do things and they don't have doubts about their ability, then they can reconnect and also to look back at those times and those growth periods without judgment, without saying, oh, but everybody can do that. It's nothing special. It is a major, major, major achievement that you had, and we should be grateful and celebrate it. But also to take that understanding, okay, I've learned that. I've learned so many difficult things, which means I can do more. I just have to open up to the possibilities rather than the limitations.
That's beautiful. Open up to your possibilities in lieu of the limitations. What a beautiful end to this interview. Stuart Elliot with double T.
double L, and double T.
Double T.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a delight. I will probably have to have you for a second interview, and then we go more deep into how you help people with the system that you have created.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that I don't do the work. I just talk to people. But my, conversations help them to go inside and discover, the real potential that lies within everybody, and especially themselves. Because it is that potential we've forgotten. And that's the key, that we have this potential. We have so many things we can do if we choose to.
Yes.
And we've got so much beauty in every single person. And, beauty is much deeper than the surface level.
Yes, it is true. And then we have to remember that we come to this world because we were loved. We are loved, and we are here to love each other.
Yeah, to share our love. It's so nice when people do that and they just look at someone and just respect them, or recognize them as an individual, a person, a beautiful person. It makes a difference in people's lives.
It makes a difference, and you don't have to agree with everybody. You can still be yourself and have your
I think it is that recognizing our differences and respecting those differences rather than judging.
than
that you're superior or they're inferior or whatever it is, the judgment we put in. Forget.
yes,
Just show the respect for them and be grateful that you've had that opportunity to see the differences.
yes, you're right. Thank you so much, Stuart.
My
And
pleasure.
then we'll probably see you again. And
Well, I'm always happy to share, and it's always wonderful to talk to you. And hopefully, your listeners were able to say, "Oh, that's a beautiful conversation," and grow from it.
yes, thank you so much. See you later, and bye, everybody.
Okay, ciao now.
Hi, it's Maritza here. If you like this episode of My Accent is No Accident podcast and would like to listen more like this, subscribe wherever you're listening to it or watching it. Leave us a nice review and share with your friends, family, and network. Thanks for listening.